you for taking the time. I know you're very busy, and we're really grateful for you to join RIAS today. In case you've been living under a rock, let me just brief everybody on Michael. Michael was a successful attorney, real estate investor, taxi cab fleet owner, a businessman here in New York City when he first met Donald Trump about 10 years prior to the election. Michael Cohen knows Donald Trump probably better than anybody other than his family. Since he left prison, Michael has written a best-selling book, Disloyal. I recently read it. I recommend it. I really enjoyed reading it. In addition to that, he's got an award-winning, highly rated podcast, and his recent appearance on Rachel Maddow was one of the most highly rated shows in her history and has been repeated a couple times lately. But let's get right into it because we know Michael Cohen, and this right now is probably more important than ever to hear this, knows Donald Trump and what's going on in his head probably better than many people. So Michael, thank you again. Let's start out. You said just about a day or two that Trump was dizzy with delight watching what was happening going on at the Capitol about 2 blocks from where I am. Can you tell us a little more?
Well, in terms of what? So, for example, do I think Donald Trump was elated watching people walking around with Donald Trump flags that they are using instead as capes, as if they were Superman, storming the castle, storming the U.S. Capitol? Now, as you know this, and I'll share this with your viewers here. I worked in the Capitol in 1987 and 1988 for Congressman Joe Moakley of Massachusetts. And I love that building. That building has a special place in my heart, very much like Notre Dame did. When I watched Notre Dame on fire, it really broke my heart. But watching these people storm the Capitol, I was wondering, what was Donald Trump thinking at the time? And I can tell you emphatically that he thought it was great because they were doing it in his honor. And Donald Trump doesn't think of himself as the president of the United States, no different than when he was the president of the Trump Organization. He didn't think of himself as just the president of a company. He sees himself as a monarch, as a dictator, as an autocrat. And the fact that he got people out there, the fact that they acted in this uncivil, this disobedient way on his behalf, elated him. And there's no doubt in my mind, which was interesting because I said that 48 hours before one of his close confidants spoke to the press and told the press that Donald Trump behaved as if he was elated over the fact that this was happening. And like I said, I told you so, and it's terrible. My hope is that it would not be this way, but this is who the man is.
Michael, you said without question, Trump will continue to act and behave abysmally like a petulant child. My first question for today was going to be, you've predicted all of this. What's going to happen next? What's the end game?
So I take no solace in the fact that I was correct. You have to remember, and again, for those folks that don't know this, 20 months ago, I testified before the House Oversight Committee, before the late, great Elijah Cummings, at which point I turned around and I told the group of GOP, the Republicans, as well as the Democrats, that under Donald Trump, that there would never be a peaceful transfer of power if he lost the election in 2020. And that's 20 months ago. On top of that, yeah, I was. And I also turned around and said that the most dangerous time in American history is going to be on the dates between January 6th and January 20th, the inauguration. And each and every day, I suspect that Donald Trump will do something, say something, and behave like a petulant child in a more disgraceful way that not just embarrasses this country, but solidifies the fact that his legacy is going to be tarnished for the rest of at least our life, including, as far as I'm concerned, all of history. So what will he do next? He's going to continue to blow this dog whistle, right? To gaslight these supporters each and every day claiming that the election was stolen, claiming that he is the rightful president, and that while he'll acknowledge that Joe Biden is the president or will be the president come January 20th, that this was a stolen election, that our American democracy is all over. And the worst part about all of this is not only is he doing this, but he's getting sycophants like Matt Gaetz, right, or Mark Meadows to do the same exact thing. Then you listen to his idiotic children, right? Don, Eric, Ivanka, even Tiffany now, Jared, they all get up and they're basically spewing the same stupidity that Donald Trump is doing. And it's a disgrace, not just to our country, but to democracy, which we try to instill in other countries. How could you tell another country about how great democracy is when you have a president of the United States is acting in such an undemocratic way?
Something, I'm jumping around here because I ask you this when we're together a lot. I always think about this. Was he like this when you worked with him? He seems to have gone off the complete deep end. And I interviewed him several times over the years, over 30 years. I've been up in the office, and I was up in the office once with you,
Yep.
and I saw him. He did not seem like this. Was he like this when you worked with him?
It's a very different Donald Trump today than he was before. A lot of people take jabs at me and say, oh, well, you worked for him for over a decade and a half. You did his dirty deeds for him. You helped to promote him and so on. Yes, I did. I helped to promote him. Yes, I acted in ways that if I can go back in time, I certainly would have. But I want people to remember that Donald Trump is merely a microcosm of the real estate industry. Forget about worldwide. I'm talking about just in New York alone, right? There are a multitude of developers here that dwarf him and the Trump organization in terms of real estate. So yeah, did we play hardball with contractors? Sure we did, right? And I bet some of the people there in Germany and in other parts of the world that are with us today know people in the real estate industry. Sure we stiffed contractors. Sure we bullied people into getting what we wanted. But did it really matter? Well, in our small world it did, but it certainly didn't matter on the stage that Donald Trump is acting on now as the president of the United States of America. What this idiot in chief has not realized is that every single word that comes out of his mouth is important, that there is no just slight of comment that he can elicit that is not going to be taken seriously. Donald Trump has become the worst version of himself imaginable. He is completely intoxicated. He is drugged out of his mind on power, and he's living in an alternate universe. It's a universe that only exists between Trump, between his ears. And unfortunately, and this is the scariest part of it all, is that 70 million people voted for him. Now they can say, well, it's not that we voted for him. It's just that we voted against Joe Biden. I don't ascribe to that ideology or that theory. You voted for Donald Trump. You held your nose and you voted for him. But remember, thank God that we were lucky enough that 9 million more people voted for Biden, because 4 more years of Donald Trump in this office, we would not be a democracy. He would figure out how to become president for life. Every single one of his Democratic opponents, myself included, anybody that was a large Democratic donor, Donald Trump had them on a hit list. And the way he weaponized the Justice Department, every single one of these people would be basically in fear, or should be in fear, that he would imprison them, destroy them with the power of government. We would not be the democracy that America is today and has become under another 4 years of Trump rule.
You say he believes. I'm 2 blocks from the White House. I took a run over there the other day. I come here periodically to Washington. It has become an absolute fortress. beyond anything you can imagine. You can't get, and it's not just because of what happened the other day on Capitol Hill. It's a permanent situation. It is, Pennsylvania Avenue was closed off a number of years ago. Now Lafayette Park is closed off, and it's just unbelievable. You said that he believes he really won the election. He really believes that in his mind, and he's convinced those 70 million people of that. You really believe that he believes he won the election?
Yeah, I do. And I made a couple of statements to various different outlets, media outlets, about such. He truly believes that he won the election. He truly believes that he is the winner, that Joe Biden is a loser. He has a very fragile ego. And the notion that he lost this election after getting 7 million more voters in 2020, right, that voted for him than in his 2016 election win, which he will describe as unprecedented. He truly believes that he won this election, that it was stolen from him, and they perpetuate these ridiculous theories and these ridiculous rumors that the voting machines had fake, or they had additional electronics in them, that anyone that pushed the button for Donald Trump was automatically cast as a vote for Joe Biden. He believes that there are hundreds of thousands of mail-in votes, these ballots that were for him, that were sitting in boxes underneath people's desks, bound for shredders. And none of this is true. And yet, interestingly enough, smart people who I know, one guy is a doctor. He said to me, well, what about all of those boxes underneath the desks in Pennsylvania? And I said to him, you've got to be joking, right? I mean, he's a doctor. You're educated. Do you really believe, simply because you're seeing a video of it, did you see what's inside the box? Or somebody wrote Donald Trump ballots for shredding? Do you really think if somebody was going to shred Donald Trump, ballots, that they would actually mark the outside of a box? I said, you're really not that stupid, are you? Because if you are, I don't want to come here ever again. It's scary to me that Donald Trump believes in the Stalinistic approach to information, which is the more that you say something over and over and over again, the more that people will begin to believe it and to repeat it. And that's exactly what he's done.
Want to just quickly get in a couple of questions here from some of our guests from the networks. Michael Gargiulo, host of WNBC's morning show, has a question for you, Michael.
Michael, so I know this is for your insight into his psyche is just fascinating, I think, to all of us to hear. I want to ask you a more base question. Financially, what is Donald Trump hiding financially that's kept him from releasing tax returns, that's kept him from releasing other real records? What's really going on? Did he get money from Deutsche Bank? Did he get money from Russian banks? What's the real story?
Okay, so the New York Times did a tremendous expose on Donald Trump with the taxes and his relationship to Deutsche Bank. So we do know that Deutsche Bank is one of two companies that have made loans to Donald Trump. And that's just a fact, and that's recorded. The other one is a fund that actually the son of the CFO of the Trump organization, Alan Weisselberg, his son Jack Weisselberg, they're the second lender to Trump. But that's not what Donald Trump is concerned and worried about in regard to the release of his tax return. Has nothing to do with his debt, because he's not wrong when he talks about how his debt to asset is significantly low. It's low enough that he would be able to get those loans. The real concern for Donald Trump is what's going to happen when those tax returns are released. People will start to go through them, and many of the deductions and many of the ways that he takes the deductions are illegal. And so he will end up with a tax bill into the several hundreds of millions of dollars that he has not either declared properly or reported properly. And he'll make up the argument that he's under audit, he's always under audit, et cetera, et cetera. he's never produced a single audit letter, nor have I ever seen that audit letter. Now, I'm not disputing the fact that at some point in time, his company may have been audited, but that should still not stop him from releasing it. His big concern is that it will ultimately cost him hundreds of millions of dollars in unpaid taxes. It will subject him to potentially tax evasion, misrepresentation to banks based upon his personal financial statement and the amounts that he claims that he's worth, and all hosts of other banking frauds and tax fraud.
We have several questions, Michael, from CBS in New York and several others, all asking, what do you think is going to happen on January 20th? Where do you think he's going to go? What do you think he's going to do? And do you think he's worried about being prosecuted and maybe even eventually, could he ever go to jail?
All right, so let's start with the first part. The first question was what?
Several people are asking, what's going to happen January 20th? Where do you think he's going to go? What do you think he's going to do?
Okay, so as I stated about 2.5, 3 months ago, Donald Trump will not be in Washington on January 20th. I think I was also the first to say that he will never, ever go to that inauguration, because for him, it would be tantamount to what happened to him at the Washington Correspondents' Dinner, which is where everybody was staring at every expression of Donald Trump. Oh, I didn't really care. I didn't care. I thought it was funny. What did they want me to do? Start applauding, laughing? He's so conscious of what people say about him, about his look. So the fact that he would be able to sit there and watch as Joe Biden becomes inaugurated to the same way that Barack Obama was there as he was being inaugurated. Barack Obama has enough self-confidence and enough conviction and respect for American democracy that he didn't mind being there, though he minded the fact that it was Donald Trump. I'm certain. Trump does not have that honor, that respect, that dignity. He doesn't have the fortitude himself to be able to sit there and watch as somebody else is inaugurated, because that would mean that he is the loser. And again, he cannot do that. His fragile ego does not permit that. So he will head off somewhere else. I believe that he will go to Magistan, which is what I call Mar-a-Lago on my Mea Culpa podcast. He will go there where the sycophants, this elitist sycophantic group that are members there will basically praise him and acknowledge that, oh yeah, Donald, you're right. It was stolen from you. You really should be, the president again for 4 more years. We're so sorry this happened. This isn't America. It's not democracy. And they will play to his, again, fragile ego.
A safe place for him. Allison has a question she wants to ask you. Allison, if you could also state your news organization.
Hello, Mr. Cohen. Thank you so much for being here. I'm a reporter with Dayton 24/7 Now News in Dayton, Ohio, so the Midwest. In a lot of your past interviews, you foreshadowed the violent act that we saw on the Capitol. Do you expect there to be more violent acts in the next coming weeks?
So thank you for that question. And it actually is the second part of Adam's question, which I didn't answer. So the answer is yes. Donald Trump is enjoying this, and Donald Trump will continue to blow this dog whistle to his MAGA supporters. Now, again, I've also said this when I was testifying before the House Oversight Committee. Donald Trump speaks in code. He will not come out and say, I want all my MAGA supporters to show up for this, for the inauguration. I want you to sow chaos like you've never sowed chaos. Come with zip ties and Molotov cocktails and other forms of incendiary devices. That's not what he will do. But he will say, this inauguration is an absolute sham. It's a shame to our democracy. They're taking away your rights. They're taking away your vote. They are not listening to the will of the American people, and we should not allow this to happen. Well, when he says things like we should not allow this to happen, when you have an unhinged individual that's willing to dress up as, Chewbacca in a bikini, you have to understand that you are blowing a dog whistle to each and every one of these these individuals and telling them to figure out how to do something. Now, now that Twitter has shut down Donald Trump's account and they're not going to be able to play off of that, I understood that they were going to Parler, which is uncensored. And all of these groups have their way of disseminating this hurtful propaganda to one another. So I do suspect that there will be protests upon protests by roughly the same individual and the same groups that stormed the Capitol. And I do believe it's going to be dangerous. But here's the benefit. We made this mistake is acknowledged on how easily they infiltrated the Capitol. It will not happen again in DC. Rest assured now that the DC police, the Secret Service, the FBI, they are monitoring every single one of these actions, and these groups will be shut down. They will be kept far away from wherever Joe Biden is going to be at for the inauguration, especially considering you're going to also have President Barack Obama. You're going to have George Bush as well as Bill Clinton. So you could rest assured that the chaos that Donald Trump helped to incite will not take place again on the 20th.
That's a good point that the other presidents are going to be here. I'm going to be here back for the inauguration, and I'm really concerned about violence on that day. There's a lot of talk on those places like Parler and others, trying to brew up some violence. Marita, you have a question. If you could tell us what news organization you're from as well.
Hi, I'm a freelance journalist from Germany and future RIAS alumni. So I was wondering what you think the next actions in the last few days of Trump's presidency are going to be. And you talked a lot about his fragile ego and his lack of self-confidence. How much do you think is due to this, and how much is strategic thinking, especially in the discussion about pardoning himself and other family members?
I just want to say, Michael, you always talk about, he's a bully, and but is he really a coward deep down?
Well, look, the answer to that is yes. Deep down, he's a coward. He has his whole entire life had individuals like myself handling all of his problems. He creates the mess, and then he needed somebody to get him out of that mess. The problem for him right now is that he does not have a Roy Cohn in his arsenal. He definitely doesn't have a Michael Cohen in his arsenal. What does he have? He is Jared Kushner, right? Jared, Ivanka, they've run for cover right now because they're still so desperate to try to figure out how they're going to stay in socially polite society, which they can no longer because of the stain on them as a result of their relationship. Who does he have? Mark Meadows, maybe one of the dumbest people in Washington. Who does he have? Matt Gaetz, another sycophantic fool that's continuing, after all of this, continuing to spew nonsensical conspiracy theory. So the answer is his fragile ego is right now in flux because he wants to say things, he wants to do things, and so he can't do it because nobody's listening. And there's really nobody left in Washington other than a handful of people. I mean, look at what Don Jr. did yesterday, out there inciting, right, this seditious behavior. Well, what do you think is going to happen next? Now that the FBI and the Justice Department are going to be looking into it, Don Jr. doesn't realize that he doesn't have his father's presidential immunity. And I'm not even sure the president has immunity for the behavior that he's done. So will Don Jr. end up getting indicted? I certainly hope so. Will he end up seeing, the cell that I was in? I certainly hope so. And the same for Eric, and the same for Tiffany, and the same for, for Mark Meadows and everyone that sat there and egged this thing on. I mean, this isn't just a one-offer. This is a continuous pattern by Donald Trump and family and, sycophantic followers just acting in a manner which is just completely undemocratic and unparalleled to anything we've ever seen in this country.
You were very close with Don Jr. In fact, you met the president through his son, Don Jr. And you talk in your book about how he's tried to carry the mantle of his father, maybe some talk about maybe running for mayor of New York and other things. He's been out there speaking with Kimberly Guilfoyle. But you talk in the book about how he's treated by his father, often treated very badly. Tell us a little bit about what you saw firsthand and that dynamic between father and son.
Well, as you said, I met Don Jr. in 2005, and it was Don Jr. who actually made the introduction to me to his father, which ultimately led to Donald Sr. asking me to come to work for his eponymous company. As it relates to the behavior of father to son, my understanding, and these are from stories told to me by his siblings, by Donald's siblings, that the relationship between Fred and Donald was very similar to that between Donald and Don Jr., which is it was very caustic. He basically demeaned Don on many occasions in front of as many people as he possibly could. So it's a kind of a relationship that I never really understood, because it's very different than the relationship that I have with my father or the relationship that I have with my son. He was constantly demeaning. He would say that Don Jr. has the worst judgment of any individual that he has ever met in his entire life. And he used to castigate Don in front of, full crowds of people in the office on a regular basis, which is why on many occasions when he was so cruel to me as well, the way I rationalized it, well, this is just the way that he is. I mean, I'm basically in good company if what he's doing to me is similar to what he's doing to Don, as well as to Eric and Ivanka, their spouses, and to, many other people in the company. That's just Donald Trump's personality. He, as you stated before, Adam, he's a very weak-minded individual. He's a coward. And this is one way that he made himself, feel important and powerful.
Volker Peterson, you have a question?
Yes, thanks, Adam. Hi, Michael, Mr. Cohen. Great that we can talk to you. I'm from Berlin. I work for NTV News Television. And there was always talk about Trump's long-term strategies, if he had one in the past 4 years or if he has one now. And I would like to ask you, what's your thought about that?
What's my thought? Well, first, my thought is that I think the baby needs a bottle in the background. Donald Trump has no long-term goals. He had no long-term plans. Donald Trump is the guy who shoots from the hip and he takes it one day at a time. Many things that we talked about as we were leading up to the determination of whether to run for president or not in 2015, 2016, is what would be his platform? What were the things that he would do in order to be a successful president? Well, the first thing and the most important thing that we talked about ad nauseum was an infrastructure bill, because the United States infrastructure is in desperate need of repair. And that's why at the very beginning of Trump's presidency, he went to Dubai, he went to the Arab Emirates, to China, to Japan, and came back stating, well, I just raised $250 billion from the Arab Emirates. I just raised $250 billion from China and $250 billion from Japan in order to invest in the United States in an infrastructure fund. That's what he was supposed to do, right? He campaigned on the fact that he's this great builder, that he knows contracts and he knows how to do great negotiation with, foreign leaders and foreign countries. But he chose not to do that. Right out of the gate, he decided that what he was going to run on was going to be hate, was going to be a Muslim ban, that he was going to, in essence, ban Islam from coming to the United States by claiming that they are all terrorist organizations, and started with, I believe it was in Syria. Now, I'm not saying that our immigration doesn't need overhaul. It most certainly does. But the right thing to have started out with and run with would have been infrastructure, because that would have employed more Americans than I think any other type of project, and the country needs it. And on top of that, it would have given everybody a good paying job for many, many decades to come, because that's how much work needs to be done. So when you ask me about Donald Trump's long-term thinking, Donald Trump doesn't think more than 3-4 minutes ahead. And the worst thing, and I've said this many times, the most dangerous person in the room is not Donald Trump. The most dangerous person is the last person who has Trump's ear. And it doesn't matter who it is, because that's what stays in his mind. So when Steve Bannon and Steve Miller promoted the Muslim ban, not the travel ban, but the Muslim ban, that's why he acted the way that he did.
Wow. We have time for just a couple more. Isabel Corner from NTV, go ahead.
Can you hear me? I'm having difficulties with the microphone. I was wondering about your take on his nuclear authority at this point after everything that has happened this week, and if you share Nancy Pelosi's reported concern about his political authority with regards to nuclear weapons, and if there's anything anyone could do about this authority.
Well, the last part of your question is, of course, you know, they could find somebody who has enough gumption to invoke the 25th Amendment, but I highly doubt that we're going to see that coming from the likes of a Mike Pence or, you know, any other member of his cabinet. So I don't see that as being likely. On top of that, I also don't see an impeachment moving fast enough that it's going to do anything. So I acknowledge Speaker Pelosi's concerns. Donald Trump is an unhinged, caged rat right now, and he is petrified. The fact is, he does have the nuclear codes. The fact is, I actually thought that Donald Trump would try to start a war with Iran, as an example, in order to remain in power under like martial law of some sort. And I believe that it's probably Rudy Giuliani that fed him that sort of information. I mean, let's not forget, Rudy Giuliani tried to do that after 9/11 in New York for a third term. So I wouldn't be shocked if that was coming from Rudy Giuliani. But Speaker Pelosi is 100% accurate that Trump is a danger. He is a clear and present danger, not just to himself, not just to this country, but to the whole world.
It's amazing.
Thank you very much.
Michael, you recently filed a habeas corpus and a writ of mandamus in U.S. District Court. Can you tell us more about that and where that stands?
Right. So at the moment, I'm on home confinement. I was released from Otisville Federal Institution based upon the coronavirus and comorbidities. One of the things that President Trump did, along with Bill Barr, in December of 2018, and I believe it's the only bipartisan act that came out of Washington in the last 4 years, is the First Step Act. And under the First Step Act, which is 18 U.S.C. 3632, it requires that the Bureau of Prison, under a pattern analysis, provide certain classifications for individuals. So like myself, I am low and minimum, which is the lowest classification that you could possibly be. So my writ of habeas corpus is, I am asking the Bureau of Prison, being that the Bureau of Prison in a administrative proceeding, a BP-9 request that I put in, has denied me any earned time credit under the First Step Act. And the earned time credit falls under two classifications. One is work programming, and the other is educational programming. Now, I took 9 courses while I was there, and I worked each and every single day. And for that, I've accumulated over 700 hours of earned time credit. The problem is the BOP in over 2 years has failed to come up with a program on how to transfer hours, meaning the programs and the work, into days off the sentence. But what we do know is that the RDAP program, which is the Residential Drug Alcohol Prevention Program, is a 500-hour program that will give you up to 1 year of earned time credit off of your sentence. And the reason that I put in the writ of habeas corpus is if in fact I am right, and I know that I am, because there's precedented case, which is called the Goodman case, done by my former lawyer, who is the one who got me out of prison the second time on the retaliation by the government, Danya Perry. She has a precedented case that answers this exact question. Now, something that I did, which is different than others, is I also filed a writ of mandamus. And that is not just like the habeas corpus, which deals with me alone. That deals with all eligible federal inmates. And there are 153,248 of them that would be able to obtain earned time credit to have them returned either to home confinement or supervised release. And that's what I'm asking. Right now, I'm in a little bit of a flux. It's a little over 3 weeks since my filing, and they still haven't assigned a judge yet to the case. So I do suspect that once the judge is assigned, that the case will move quickly and swiftly, and in my favor as well.
So 700 hours, if you were able to win, would essentially do what?
It would take me off of home confinement and put me on supervised release, which would give me the ability to come and go and give me much more control over my own life.
Lastly, you said some of the people pardoned by Trump may testify against him. Who do you think he's going to pardon in these last couple days, including maybe himself? And explain to our guests how they could end up testifying against him, how it could be a double-edged sword for him pardoning people.
Well, the double-edged sword is the fact that once you're pardoned, you no longer have fear of being prosecuted for that crime. You basically have that get out of jail free card. And so as a result, you are not permitted to invoke the Fifth Amendment of right against self-incrimination because you cannot be charged for whatever it is that you had done. That being said, these people can now be subpoenaed to testify by various different agencies, whether it's the DA's office, the Attorney General's office, congressional, hearings that would lead to, civil or criminal prosecution. So it is that double-edged sword. Now, who Donald Trump is going to pardon? That's a great question, because I did not believe that he was going to pardon Roger Stone or Paul Manafort for the reasons that I just previously stated. But nevertheless, he did. So looking at that as an example, do I think that Donald Trump is willing to go so far and to press the boundaries of right and wrong to basically disavow the office of the pardon and to do with pardons as he has now done and show that he doesn't care about any of the other pardons that have been sent properly and vetted by the pardon office? He's just going to hand them out, very much like the way, he's handing out these medals of freedom on an ad hoc basis. I would not be shocked to see him pardon his family, pardon Kushner, and try to pardon himself. Right now, he's just weighing the damage that can do to him. But I do see him as starting to issue pardons to individuals that never should be receiving these type of benefits.
Do you ever worry that he could do something to harm you?
Listen, I worry about that every single day. I'm not going to live my life. And it's not just him. It goes back to the very first question that you raised, Adam, which is, him blowing this dog whistle to his MAGA supporters. I'm not worried about him. He doesn't have the guts to do anything. But that doesn't, change the fact that there are 70 million people, many of whom are unhinged and are willing to do things like these groups that charge the Capitol that are just insane, to be honest with you. And of course I worry about it, but I'm not going to allow it to change my life and to prohibit me from doing the things that I am permitted to do on a daily basis.
Thankfully, they're probably not New Yorkers. So, but finally, I want to just ask you for your personal thoughts. You worked with him for 10 years. You talk in the book about how intoxicating it was, how your family wanted you to quit. Often, time and time again, they urged you to quit, but you stayed in there. and then you saw him get elected. You helped him get elected. You were instrumental in raising money and getting the multi-ethnic group together, and you saw the progress of him. I wouldn't call it progress, but as a president. And now you sit and watch all of this from home, cable channels wild with Trump information. What are you feeling today when you see all this and the memories of working with him back then? And what goes through your mind?
A lot of sadness. First of all, the sadness, of course, is when I see my wife and my children. There's a lot of pain that this has caused my family. But as I watched the lunacy that's going on, and knowing that I was a part of it, that I was the one that got him to consider the run in 2011, that again got him to consider the run in 2015 for 2016, that I played this integral part in creating a president. I never expected that Donald Trump was going to debase the office of the presidency in the manner that he did. It's why, for example, in 2015, I created the National Diversity Coalition, because I wanted Donald Trump to be better than he actually is. I know Donald Trump was a flawed, ugly painting. And what I tried to do, and many people in this cabinet and people that are surrounding him, even to this day, say the same thing. I didn't want to leave him because I thought I could make him better. Why I thought that, I don't know. But I thought that I can technically whitewash this ugly painting and make something beautiful out of it. Like to be able to help the various different minorities that, have been left, to fend for themselves while, white America walked all over them. My hope with the National Diversity Coalition was that we would be a more representative, that Donald Trump would be more representative and be a leader for all of the various different groups, race, religions, creeds, colors, sexual orientations, that he would rise to the level of the office of the president. I mean, think about it for a second. One man out of 350 million Americans becomes president. We all thought that he would rise to be a better man than what he actually was at the Trump org. But he didn't do that. He decided to debase the office and to make the office of the president of the United States of America into the office of Donald J. Trump at the Trump Organization, which is a bully, a narcissist, a know-it-all. And the truth is that Donald Trump is legitimately ignorant and he's arrogant. Now, you can get away with that as a real estate guy in New York who inherited a ton of money from his father, but you can't be that for the president of the United States of America. And that's the saddest part of this whole thing, because if Donald Trump would have acted like what we wanted him to do, as opposed to the things that he did, he would have won a second term, and he could have been, he could have gone down in history as a great president instead of the worst president that this country has ever seen and probably ever will. I'm not sure anybody can sink lower than Donald Trump has. And he has destroyed his family name. He has destroyed his legacy. The notion that there would be Donald J. Trump the 5th and 6th, as the kids continue, to have children. I wouldn't name my kid Donald for that matter. I mean, it's a stain on his family name and his legacy, and history will record it that way.
Thank you so much, Michael. We're so grateful. This was really enlightening, informational. Everybody, if you have a chance, read Disloyal. It's a great read. And Michael's podcast, Mea Culpa. Tell us quickly about the podcast, how often it's on. You've had some great guests. Ben Stiller recently was great.
Yeah, so Ben Stiller is on it right now. That dropped yesterday. We're doing generally 3 podcasts a week, between 2 to 3. We slacked off a little bit because of the Christmas, New Year holiday. Guys wanted to be able to take off. There's a lot of work that goes into the production of each and every podcast, but we're just about 3 months old, and we already have just shy of 3 million downloads It's getting great reviews all over. There's a great article by Jim Mustian today in the Associated Press. I mean, the podcast, though, this is where I would disagree with this guy who wrote, he's a podcast review guy, that this podcast will cease to exist or be reduced after Trump leaves office. First of all, while Trump leaves office, he will continue to be a thorn in Joe Biden's backside for the next 4+ years. That's a fact. So there'll be plenty to talk about there. But my podcast is not an anti-Donald Trump podcast. We're talking about it on a daily basis because Donald Trump is not only the president of the United States, he's a living disaster for a president of the United States. And how could you not talk about the chaos that Captain Chaos sows each and every day? I mean, every day the man continues to spew racist, sexist, misogynistic, xenophobic, homophobic, Islamophobic, anti-Semitic rant. So how could you not talk about it? It's no different than CNN or MSNBC or NBC or ABC or CBS or any of the people that are watching right now. You cannot help but talk about it because he wants you to talk about it, which is why he makes so many crazy statements each and every day. So once Donald is out, yes, we will shift to things that the Biden administration is doing. And we are a political newscast. We are not an anti-Donald Trump podcast. It's just getting great reviews. People love the authenticity. They love the open, honest conversation. And, there is also a second book in the works right now, which will be really about the Department of Injustice and all of the things that transpired, including all of the players from the beginning, which is the Steele dossier, to my unconstitutional remand of me back to prison, basically violating my constitutional rights and making me the first political prisoner of my own country for not allowing my country to violate my constitutional First Amendment right. So that's my life right now. That and staying home 22 hours a day.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you so much for taking the time. Everyone I'm reading is just so grateful and thanking us for having you. So again, thank you for taking the time, and we look forward to talking to you soon.
And Adam, if there are additional questions that they have, they can hit me up on my Twitter account at Michael Cohen 212. And I can answer some of your additional questions there or through other social media platforms.
That would be great. Thank you very much.
You got it. Enjoy. Have a great day, everyone.
Really grateful, Michael.
Michael. It's fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you so much.